Hello and welcome to the day 2 of the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass session for March 2019 examination being organized by ACCA Pakistan. I am your tutor, Kashif Kamran. Now, on the first day of this Practice to Pass session for March 2019 examination, that was yesterday, I focused on risk assessment, and the agenda for the second day today is to focus on evidence. Now, evidence is a very important area in terms of your exam paper. It is a core syllabus area, and this is a syllabus area where you should be better prepared, because this is an area which comes on a very regular basis in 100 marks paper. Now, a lot of time student tends to underperform on the area of evidence and also the areas known as procedures. So through my session today and through the next 2.5 hours or so, I would be focusing on making you good on evidence and procedures. Now, just before starting on with my day 2 agenda, on the right hand side of my presentation, you can see my previous sessions. In my March 18 session, then in my June 18 session, then in the September 18 session, and in the December 18 sessions, the videos of which are available on the Vimeo ACCA Pakistan channel. You can explore Vimeo and you can explore the channel of ACCA Pakistan for all the previous webinars I have conducted since March 18, and you can explore variety of questions which I have performed on this topic. In the March 18 webinar, I did the December 13 question and the December 14 question. Then in the June 18 webinar, I did the December 14 question, and then I did the December 16 question. Then in the September 18 session, I did the June 17 question. And then in the last one, the December 18, I did the December 16, September 18, and the December 17. So you have variety of support and you have variety of resources. So if you want to polish up evidence and you want to polish up procedures, then the previous sessions in accumulation can really be beneficial for you in preparing yourself for the topic evidence. Now, in the March 2019 session, which is on the left of the screen, I'll be focusing on the December 18 question number 2B, which was the last exam sitting. And then I will be focusing on the June 14 question 3A. So I have included two new questions. I am not repeating any questions which I have done in the previous session, so that you can get a better diversity of practice in these sessions. Then you have some home questions to be done, which is the June 17 question 4 and the December 16 question 2. Okay, let's then start on with evidence. Let's try to understand what you should be knowing about evidence to be better equipped as a student attempting a question paper on evidence. I'll be drilling two questions today in the session, December 18 and June 14. But again, before drilling the question, I need to set the right tone for evidence. And to set the right tone of evidence, I will be taking on my Word file as I was using yesterday in the session. And again, this Word file will be shared with you on the WhatsApp group after the session ends. Now, on day 2 of this Practice to Pass session, we are focusing on evidence. Not just evidence, we're also focusing on procedures. Now, these are the areas where student tends to underperform. So let's see what we should be knowing about evidence and procedures. Now, in terms of evidence and procedures, first of all, you should be very familiar with the requirement of the question, which comes on procedures and which comes on evidence. First of all, when you look at the exam requirements, in terms of a question which comes on procedures, the examiner straight away asks you, recommend procedures. on a fill in the blank and a question mark. So examiners straight away ask you, recommend procedures on a fill in the blank and a question mark, right? So you need to recommend the procedures in the exam paper. Now, secondly, when the question comes on evidence, the examiner asks you two very important things in a question on evidence. The examiner asks you comment on the matters and explain the evidence you should expect to find in the review of the working paper file. Question mark. Now, first of all, we need to understand the two requirements and the marking scheme associated with these two requirements. And we need to understand the difference between writing a procedure and between writing evidence so that you know how to get that implemented once I start the practice session. Now, when we look at a procedure first, procedures has a 1 mark marking scheme, 1 mark per procedure. So you need to see the number of marks available to see how many procedures you need to write in the exam paper. So it's 1 mark per procedure. Now, when you look at 1 mark per procedure, you have half a mark for the procedure and you have another half a mark for the reason of the procedure, the reason of the procedure. No procedure can end without a reason. So whatever the auditor is doing, there has to be a purpose, right? There has to be a purpose of doing that. So half a mark for procedure and half a mark for the reason of the procedure. That's how you're getting 1 mark per procedure. Now, when you think about a procedure and you have a literal clear meaning of the word procedure, procedure means that the auditor is doing something. The emphasis is on doing. The auditor is doing something because it's a procedure. And when we speak of procedure, procedure means you are doing something. So doing is a verb. Doing is the verb. Now, if you have a realistic view of what the auditor do in the audit, what the auditor do in the audit, what the auditor do, then the answer is very simple. There are so many things the auditor do in the audit. Number one, the auditor review something. The auditor review many documents, many source documents, like the auditor review the board minutes, the auditor review the loan agreements, the auditor review the lease agreement, or the auditor review the invoices. So auditor reviews many source documents, right? That's the first thing the auditor is doing when he's on the field work. Secondly, auditor recalculates. That is another thing the auditor do, right, during the course of the audit. Now, when you think about auditor recalculates, there are so many things the auditor recalculates, right? There are so many things the auditor recalculates, like auditor recalculates the finance cost, or auditor recalculates the amortization expense, or the auditor recalculates the depreciation expense, etc. So there are so many things, right? The auditor can recalculate. Then another thing the auditor can do is that the auditor can analyze something. The auditor can analyze something. The auditor can analyze the ratios. The auditor can analyze the ratios, or auditor can analyze the increase or decrease increase and decrease over the last year. So auditor can do an analysis, right? The auditor can analyze something. So the procedure means verb. The procedure means you're doing something. So auditor review, auditor recalculates, auditor analyze, and that's not the end of the story. The the auditor even discuss. The auditor even discuss with management. So many things. So many things the auditor discuss with management. Any problems, any issues, anything where you believe the management is wrong, anything where you believe the management is doing a wrong accounting treatment, you will discuss with the management. There are so many important things the auditor do when he's on the audit, right? The auditor reviews something, that's to do something. Auditor recalculates something, that's to do something. Auditor analyze something, that's to do something. Auditor discuss something, that's to do something. So the focal point of a procedure is to do. And that has to be demonstrated by you as a student in the exam paper that your focal point is on the procedure. Now, there is half a mark. There is half a mark for a procedure. But there is another half a mark for the reason. There is another half a mark for writing the reason. Now, only the procedures cannot give you full 1 mark. So when you say review the source document, you have to tell why. You have to tell the reason. Now, this is very important, right? This is very important because most of the time in the AAA exam, we don't write the why answer. That is not just confined to this topic. That is confined to the whole 100 marks paper, that we don't write the why. We don't write the why, right? So if the auditor says review the document, why are you reviewing the document? What's the reason? And if you say you recalculate the finance cost, then why? What's the reason of recalculating the finance cost, or what's the reason of recalculating the amortization expense? Analyze, analytical procedures, right? So auditor do the analytical procedure, auditor analyze something. So if you are analyzing the ratio, then you have to tell why, reason. So if you are analyzing the receivable days, why? If you are analyzing the inventory days, why? Then if you are discussing something with the management, why are you discussing with management? What benefits will you get of this discussion? The reason. So every time the examiner asks you to write a procedure, remember the two golden rules here, right? Number one, half a mark for a procedure. Then there is a half a mark for the reason. And accumulatively, that gives you 1 mark per procedure, right? So remember the procedure is about doing something. Is that clear to every one of you? Is everyone clear on the definition of a procedure here? Procedure means you're doing something, right? Procedure means to review something. Procedure means to recalculate something. Procedure means to analyze something. And procedure means to discuss something, right? And is everyone clear on the marking allocation of a procedure? Half a mark for a procedure and half a mark for a reason. Now you go down further. When you're writing a procedure in the exam paper, a lot of time we tend to write a wrong procedure, or we tend to write a weak procedure. We tend to write a weak procedure. Now, if you look at some of the common procedures student uses in an exam paper, I believe there are three common procedures which a student uses a lot in an exam paper, but never use them rightly. The one good procedure the student use in the exam paper, you might agree with that if you're repeating the AAA paper, is that you write review the board minutes. I believe all of you agree to that. This is a very common procedure you write in exam paper. Is that true? Is that true? If I can get your quick answers to that. Right? So this is a very common procedure, right? That all of you tends to write in an exam paper. I need to be critical here that will you score a mark when you write a review of board minutes? And how can you gain your marks? So let's do the criticism, right? Let's do the criticism and review the board minutes. Then there is another procedure you write in exam paper, which is to obtain a representation letter. Is that true even that you a lot of time you obtain a representation letter? That's the second most favorite procedure of a student in exam paper. So I need to be criticizing that when to use it, when not to use it. And the last procedure, which a student use a lot in exam context, is to agree the financial statements. Agree the financial statements for disclosure, or agree the financial statement for something disclosed in the financial statement, or agree the balance sheet, or agree the income statement for something put into the balance sheet, or something shown in the balance sheet, or some disclosures given in the notes to the account. So a lot of times student tends to write agree the financial statement. These are three very common procedures a student tends to write most of the time in exam context. Let's see what is right with it and what's wrong with it. Okay, let's start the first journey. In an exam context, when you write review the board minutes, and suppose you are writing an answer in exam paper under review the board minutes, and you write something like this. You write review the board minutes for approval, and you're very happy you get 1 mark. No. When you say review the board minutes for approval, this is only giving you 0.5 marks. Because you are not telling approval of what. Review the board minutes for the approval of what. Is that missing from here? Is it a vague procedure? So review the board minutes for the approval of something, right? Is that something missing from here? And I come happy out of the exam hall saying I got 1 mark for this procedure. No, you didn't got 1 mark for this procedure because you just wrote review the board minutes for approval, but you didn't specify you didn't specify the approval for what. So you lost your mark. Then second, you write in the exam paper review the board minutes for acquisition. Review the board minutes for acquisition. Again, this statement is not giving you 1 mark. This is giving you another 0.5 marks. Because when you say review the board minutes for acquisition, you does not state what information regarding acquisition is being obtained from the board minutes. Are you obtaining the approval of acquisition, or are you obtaining the justification of acquisition? So in the first point, you wrote approval, but you missed what approval of what. In the second point, you wrote the acquisition, but you didn't specified what what in, information are you looking for. What information are you looking for? What information are You didn't specify what information are you looking for regarding acquisition from the board minutes. From the board minutes. Are you looking for the approval of the acquisition in the board minutes? Or are you looking for the justification of the acquisition, that why the company acquired? What was the rationale? What was the basis of acquisition? What was the reason? What was the reason to acquire? So you are looking at something, right? So can you see the first procedure and can you see the second procedure? And can you judge there is something missing from both of them? Can you feel there is something missing from the procedure 1 and procedure 2? And how many times we do that in exam paper that we are so confident of getting a 1 mark. But see, with the one procedure number 1 in example and a procedure number 2 in example, we're not getting 1 mark. So please, you need to ask yourself, am I missing something when I'm writing a procedure? When you're practicing at home ahead of your exams in March, when you're writing a procedure, ask a question to yourself, have I missed something in this? The last one, when you write review the board minutes, you only write review the board minutes. That's the most bad procedure. And you again scoring, this would score no marks at all. At least in the first one, you talked about approval, but you didn't talked about approval of what? In the second, you talked about acquisition, but you didn't talked about acquisition what? Acquisition approval or acquisition basis. And in the third one, you simply wrote review the board minutes. That's the most blank statement. That's the most blank statement. That's the most blank statement. And you will score no marks on that. So can all of you see the 3 wrong procedures in front of your screen? Because board minutes is such a common procedure you write in exam paper. And you agree to that this is the most common procedure you write in the exam paper. But can you see the blunders? Can you see the blunders you do in review the board minutes? Have you realized your blunders? If I can get your quick yes and no answers to this. Have you realized your blunders on writing board minutes? And have you got the right way of writing the board minutes? See the right way of writing the board minutes. Let's change the ink color here. Let's bring the blue color and let's see what's the right way of writing. This is the right procedure. This is the right procedure, which will give you definitely the 1 mark. You will say, review the board minutes. Review the board minutes to confirm that the acquisition of the new subsidiary was approved by the board. Now, can you see this procedure? Review the board minutes. Can you see the procedure? And can you see the reason? Confirm that the acquisition of what? Acquisition of a new subsidiary was approved by the board. So what are we looking for? We are looking for the approval of the board, right? And you can also name the new subsidiary. There might be a name of a new subsidiary in the case study. Name of the new subsidiary in the case study. That will be given in the exam context. So can you feel the red and the blue? Can you see how red was wrong and how blue is right? So you need to write the blue procedure, right? Every possible time. So it's not just review the board minutes. It's not just review the board minutes for acquisition. It's not just review the board minutes for approval. Because in all contexts, we're missing something. Right? So that's a 1 mark procedure, right? Because procedures are to be recommended. Procedures are not paragraphs, right? Procedures are recommended. The procedures are put into bullets, right? Okay, the second one, obtain a representation letter. Let's see what bad you do with obtain a representation letter. Now, first of all, when you obtain a representation letter, because for students, you can obtain it anytime for anything, right? So for a student, the representation letter can be taken for anything. That's wrong. When you obtain a representation letter for subjective areas, for areas involving management judgments, areas involving complexity, you might take representation letters for provisions, estimates. You might take them for fair values. You might take them for um, complex areas like actuarial valuations. Subjectivity, right? Subjectivity. So you need to understand that the representation letters is only taken in subjective areas, in complex areas like provisions, like estimates, like fair values. These are good enough areas to take a representation letter. Now, when you write a representation letter, you cannot just write it this way. Obtain a representation letter. This is 0 marks, 0 marks. Because you didn't justify it, why are you taking a representation letter? For what are you taking the representation letter? So that's a blank procedure. But when you say, when you write the second one, which is this way, you say obtain a representation letter. Obtain a representation letter the for for the estimates made by management. Okay, that's at least better because you justified that you're taking it for estimate. In the first one, you even didn't justify what are you taking it for. But in the second one, you at least justified that you're taking it for an estimate. So this will give you 0.5 marks because still you are missing something. Now see the right procedure. If I have to write the right way is this: obtain or seek a representation, a written representation. Obtain or seek a written representation from those charged with governance. Obtain, seek a representation letter from those charged with governance regarding adequacy or completeness of the provisions of the estimate made by management. See, can you see the obtain seeker representation from those charged with governance? And can you see the reason? Adequacy or completeness? Adequacy or completeness of the estimate. Why am I taking the representation letter? I'm not just taking a representation letter for estimate, rather I'm taking a representation letter for the completeness of the estimate, for the adequacy of estimate, because estimate is understated. There is a risk in estimate, right? So I am taking it for the adequacy because through the representation letter, I want to mitigate my risk. So the risk in the estimate is the understatement, right? So am I taking the representation letter for adequacy? So have you got the track? Review the board minutes, obtain a representation letter. But have you got the way out what you do wrong when you write these procedures in exam paper? Is this exercise really benefited you? Before we come to the last one, agree the financial statements. Has this exercise really made your mindset clear that what you do wrong? Okay, let's take the last one. Agree the financial statement, which is yet another very common procedure the students use in exam paper. Now, when you go down and you say agree the financial statements, again, if you just write a blank statement in the exam paper, agree the financial statements. Again, this will score 0 marks. This is straight away 0 marks because you didn't specify what are you agreeing. What are you agreeing from the financial statement? Or what is the reason? What is the reason to agree? So you didn't tell anything. You even didn't tell what are you agreeing with. You even didn't tell what is the reason to agree. Okay, then comes another student who says, okay, let's improve this. And another student would write this way: agree the amounts for the contingent liability, agree agree the contingent liability disclosed in the notes to financial statement. Now this will give you 0.5 marks, because at least you tell what are you agreeing. You are agreeing the contingent liability disclosed. So at least this gives you 0.5 marks. But if you are writing a proper procedure, agree the financial statement, no marks. Agree the financial statement for a contingent liability, 0.5 marks. And then you come back with the best procedure. Now, when you write in a best procedure for agree the financial statement, the best procedure to agree the financial statements would be agree the financial statements to confirm the disclosure of the contingent liability related to the ongoing court case related to the ongoing court case which has which relating to the ongoing court case where the injured party has claimed $10 million. So I want to see the notes for a contingent liability, which is regarding to the court case. And I want to see where the injured party has claimed 10 million. So that means in the note, you must have disclosed the $10 million, because the shareholder wants to see the value of the contingent liability, not just the contingent liability. So can you feel the difference between a wrong procedure and a right procedure? Did you recognize a procedure which scores 0 marks, a procedure which scores 0.5 marks, and a procedure which scores 1 mark? So what's the best way? Have you identified a procedure? Have you identified a procedure with 0 marks, with 0.5 marks, and with 1 mark? So when will you get 1 mark? When you tell the procedure and when you tell the reason. And the reason has to be very specific. The reason has to be very specific, not a vague reason. So let's conclude this up now. You have half a mark for a procedure, right? You have half a mark for a procedure and you have half a mark for a reason. Now, when you are writing a reason, this reason has to be very specific. This reason has to be very specific. And this reason has to be very specific to the case study. The reason has to be very specific to the case study. So the more specific reason you write, there are higher chances that you score 1 mark. And the more journal reason you write, or you don't write a reason at all, then you're not scoring the full 1 mark. So please assure this is a opportunity of getting a 1 mark, and a very easy 1 mark. You simply need to write a procedure and a reason. You cannot get as simple thing as that in a AAA paper, but still you spoil this topic. You have so much of different hypothetical assumptions around procedures. You have so much ifs and buts around procedures. You have so much myths around procedures, and you keep spoiling them. I try to make that list of procedures uh, clear to all of you. Are you getting a better picture of procedures in the last half an hour? Or have you got a better picture of procedures in the last half an hour? Do you think they are doable? Do you think they're doable in the March exams? Okay, that's great. Okay, one final thing, right? I uh, I use a mnemonic, and a lot of students who have been associated with me might be knowing this mnemonic. Uh, I try using this mnemonic for procedures known as CVRM. And that's where I'll end my lecture on procedure, right? And I'll shift down to evidence because we need to take the past papers as well. When we think about a procedure, and in the exam, I am attempting procedures, I can think about four things in the exam paper. C, V, R, M. Now, C is the case, and I just told you that they have to be case specific. The more, the better. So if your procedure is case specific, that is the best procedure. If you involve the case, as suppose you're writing subsidiary, but you write the name of the subsidiary. If you write the name of the subsidiary, that's better. If you write contingent liability, but you write the value of the contingent liability, right? You write the value of the contingent liability, that's more case specific. If you write uh, something like a provision, but you specify the value of the provision if given in the case study. So if you use the specific language of the case and the specific values of the case or the specific names of the case, then there are higher chances you're writing a case specific procedure. Then second, verb. The procedure has to start with verb, right? That's where I started my lecture today. That procedure means doing something. And I just justified doing something means auditor review something, auditor recalculate something, auditor discuss something, auditor analyze something. That is doing. That is verb. No, we cannot use abbreviations in exam, right, Sardar Ali Heather? We cannot use abbreviations. Then case, verb, reason. There should be a definite reason. There should be a clear reason. Why are you doing this procedure? What what will you gain from the procedure? So did I mention that in the last half an hour that we need to write a why, the reason, right? So it has to be case specific, it has to be verb, it has to be reason, and marks. 1 mark per procedure. Now, when you sit down and you practice at home before your exams in March, and you're doing an exercise on a procedure, remember the CVRM. Remember what has been taught to you in the last half an hour. The procedure has to be case specific. It needs to utilize a verb. It should have a reason. It should have marks, right? That's the maximum we can stretch down on procedures, right? Within the limitation of the time of the session. Is that clear to everyone? Now I'll be engaging you in procedures, right? We're now jumping to evidence. We're now jumping to evidence. So procedure is what? Procedure is your field work. The field work the auditor do is a procedure, right? So procedure is basically your field work, right? What you do on field as an auditor. Okay, now let's start with evidence. A confusing thing, right, among students is evidence. Or perhaps both of them are confusing with students, right? Procedures as well as evidence. But let's see down. How can we be good on evidence just before starting on exam drilling? Now, when you look at comment on the matters, the question on evidence, right? Ask you comment on the matters. And many times in my previous webinars, a lot of students who are repeating the triple exam must be knowing that, but I believe there are many students who are appearing for the triple exams for the first time. needs an emphasis of comment on the matters. When the examiner asks you comment on the matters, you go down and you say, okay, I have to comment on the matters. Examiner says each comment will give you 1.5 marks. Not 1 mark, 1.5 marks as per the revised marking scheme, right? Comment on the matters. Now, which matters am I commenting on? Examiner says you have to comment on the three matters. Number one, you have to comment on the materiality. Comment on the materiality. And when you comment on the materiality, you will gain 1.5 marks. Then the examiner says you have to comment on the accounting treatment. Comment on the accounting treatment. And when you comment on the accounting treatment, you will gain another 1.5 marks. And then you have to comment on the risk of material misstatement. That is, what is understated, what is under, or what is overstated. And with that, you will take another 1.5 marks. I hope those of you who attended the live session yesterday on risk of material misstatement and on the audit risk, we used to do the same thing in the session yesterday. Is that clear to everyone? We were doing the same thing in the session yesterday even. We were doing the same thing in the session yesterday as well, the MTR. But how many marks were we gaining for MTR in the risk question? 3 marks. If you remember the session, the live session yesterday, we were gaining 3 marks. But when the same thing you write in an evidence question, how many marks are we gaining? 4.5. When you write the same thing in a question on evidence, how many marks are we gaining? 4.5. And if we write the same thing in a risk question, how many marks are we gaining? 3. So do you believe this MTR is a very significant mnemonic? Is a very significant mnemonic in a 100 marks paper? This mnemonic can be utilized in a question on audit risk or in a question on risk of material misstatement, and this can be utilized in a question on evidence. So is that a very important mnemonic? MTR will give you 3 marks in a question on risk, will give you 4.5 marks in a question on evidence. So is everyone clear on comment on the matters? Now the second requirement, and explain the evidence. And explain the evidence you should expect to find in the review of the working paper file. That's the second requirement. Explain the evidence. Explain the evidence. You is the manager. You is the manager should expect to find in the review of the working paper file. Manager reviews the working paper file, right? Manager is responsible to review the working paper file. Right? So review the working paper file is the responsibility of the manager. In the question, it will be written, you are a manager responsible for performing the review of the working paper, or you are a manager responsible for performing the engagement quality control review. And the examiner will say what evidence you should expect to find in the review of the working paper. Right? So let's see, what evidence do we expect to find in the review of the working paper? Evidence you should expect to find in the review of the working paper file. Now, first of all, be sure of the you, right? So you here is the manager. And that's very important because you have to do a role play. And the one who does the role play in the 3 hours in the exam hall is a wonderful student. And the one who fails to do the role play of being a manager is a very bad student. Because across the AAA paper, we are a manager, but we never justify the position. We never justify the position. So first of all, justify yourself in the exam paper. You are a manager, right? Now what are you doing? You are a manager and you are reviewing the working paper file. You are reviewing the working paper file. Is that true? Is that what the question is saying? Is that what the question is saying? You are a manager, and what are you doing as a manager? You are reviewing the working paper file. Is that true? So, do I know in the exam hall what am I doing? Am I doing the reviewing of the working paper file? Is that my responsibility? Now, when you believe that I am a manager or you are a manager and you have a review of the working paper file, the very first thing you need to imagine in the exam paper is the working paper file in front of you. You need to imagine the working paper file in front of you. You need to visualize that. You are sitting in the exam hall and you're thinking, okay, I have a file in front of me. I am a manager sitting on a table, and sitting on a table, I have a file in front of me, and I am reviewing the working papers in a file. So how would you imagine a file in the exam paper? This is the imagination of a file in front of your screen. Is this the working paper file? Can you all see the working paper file in front of you? And can you all see what is in the file? Can you see all what is in the file? The file has papers, right? Let's imagine this is a working paper file, and that's on my table, that's on your table. Now, when you look at the file in front of you, you are a manager reviewing the working paper file. Now imagine what is in the file. The file consists of papers, right? The file consists of papers. Is that true? Is that false? The file consists of papers. Is that true? Can you imagine a file? Can you see the file in front of your screen? Now, if the file consists of papers, that means the evidence in the evidence in the file, the evidence in the file is in the form of papers, is in the form of something being tangible. If the file consists of papers, right, then that means the evidence in the file, will that be in the form of papers? Will that be in the form of something being tangible or intangible? I hope you know the tangible. Tangible means something you can touch, feel. So will the file consist of papers, something which is tangible? Right? Now let's take a demonstration. Uh, can all of you imagine a file in front of you? And you can see that on your screen, right? And the file consists of the papers, right? The file consists of paper. Yasser Iqbal, in a AAA paper, we're not concerned with the electronic form, right? The AAA paper has not reached the electronic form yet. The international standards on auditing have not reached the electronic form yet. The data analytics, the artificial intelligence, the big data are the areas to come in the future exams. So currently, Yasser Iqbal, we are all focused on papers, right? We're all focused on papers. So can you all see the file in front of you? Can you all believe the file consists of papers? And does that mean the papers are all tangibles? The papers are all tangible? So when you think of the papers are tangible, then see what evidence we can have in the file. For example, let's do a quick example and shift to an exam paper. For example, I am a senior working on finance cost, right? And during the audit, I did the following procedures. Now, if I am a junior, if I'm a senior, and I'm working on a finance cost, and during the audit, I did the following procedures. Now, I'm not writing the procedures in full to save my time. You can convert the procedures to full, right? I'm just making procedures in like a skeleton form just to save my time out. Now, I must have done the following procedures on the finance cost. Number one, I must have reviewed the loan agreement. I must have reviewed the loan agreement um, for for the confirmation of the interest rate. So I should know the finance cost. I should know the interest rate for the confirmation of the interest rate, etc. Skeleton procedure. I must have uh, recalculated the finance cost. I must have recalculated the finance cost for confirmation, for confirming its accuracy. And I must have analyzed yesterday, if you remember the session yesterday, I must have analyzed the interest cover. I must have analyzed the interest cover to see the fluctuation in interest cover, so on and so forth. So if I'm working on a finance cost, I must have seen the loan agreement as a document, because the loan agreement will confirm me the total amount of the loan and the finance cost, so I can recalculate the finance cost, right? And then I could have analyzed the interest cover, right, in terms of the an analytical procedure. Right. Now, I completed my work. Now, my manager wants to review my work in wants to review my work and my file. Now, my manager wants to review my work. My manager wants to review my file because I did the three works, and the manager wants to confirm has I done the right work or not. Now, when my manager looks at the file, he's looking at the evidence in the file. Now, imagine the evidence in the file which the manager will be looking for. First of all, because I reviewed the loan agreement, so my manager will see the copy of the loan agreement in the working paper file. And the moment the manager see the copy of the loan agreement, he will be assured that being a senior, I have reviewed the loan agreement. So copy of the loan agreement to confirm the finance cost, to confirm the interest rate, etc. So will my manager see the loan agreement in my file? Because he is reviewing the file of the finance cost. So will he see the copy of the loan agreement in my file? And why a copy? Because the loan agreement belongs to the management. Can I keep the original loan agreement with me? Never. So I deliberately used the word copy because I was using the management document. So I say copy of the loan agreement in my file. Okay, then I recalculated the finance cost. Now, if I have recalculated the finance cost, I must have made my working paper for recalculation, right? Now, that working paper of recalculation will be in my file. Now, how would I justify the working paper of recalculation? When my manager see a file, in the file, the manager will see results of recalculation, results of the recalculation of the finance cost. So my manager will be very happy that I have put the results of recalculation in my working paper file. So my manager would be very delighted that I have done the right work on recalculation. Right, that is the jargon the examiner use, so we need to stick to that. Results of recalculation. So anything which the auditor do himself is the results. No. We just need to stick to what you're seeing on the screen, right? Then you analyze the interest cover, right? Now, obviously, if I have analyzed the interest cover, we must I must have made my working paper for analyzing. I must have shown on my working paper the interest cover of the last year and the interest cover of the current year. So if I have done the analysis of the interest cover, I must have shown a working paper in my file where my manager can see the interest cover of the current year and the last year, and he must see my comments under the interest cover. So again, I will have the analysis results of analysis pertaining to interest cover to confirm the fluctuations in interest cover So again, the results, right? So just before I broaden the evidence, right? Are you understanding how I did this exercise? First of all, I was a senior, and being a senior, I did some procedures, right? Now, my manager wants to review what I did. So my manager is interested to see my file. And then I imagine a file in front of me. And my manager sit on a table and I put my file in front of him. First thing he will see in my file is a loan agreement copy. Then you will see the results of recalculation. Then you will see the results of analysis. So are you understanding the working papers here? Are you understanding the file will consist of the working paper? Right? Now, that means anything the auditor do will end in results, right? Right? And the marking scheme of the evidence is 1 mark. Every evidence you write in the file will give you 1 mark. 1 mark per evidence with reason. And for every matter you write, M, T, R. For M, you will get 1.5 marks. For T, you will get 1.5 mark. And for R, you will get 1.5 mark. So you will get 4.5 marks in total. So M, T, R, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, and you get 4.5. Then you write the evidences, 1 mark, 1 mark, 1 mark. So is everyone clear with this file in front of you? And can everyone imagine this file in the exam paper? And can everyone imagine that you are looking at the papers in the file? Is everyone clear on that set of ground? So when you feel a file, you will think about papers. And when you think about papers, you are thinking about what sort of papers will I be having in front of me? Now let's make a final list. If the auditor review the documents, right? Or if the auditor recalculates, or if the auditor discuss something, or if the auditor analyze something. If the auditor reviews the document and you're writing an evidence, the evidence will be a copy of the documents. If you recalculate something, then it will be results of recalculation. And if you discuss something, then you will have notes of discussion. And if you analyze something, then you will have results of analysis. So see, I've converted the procedures to evidence, right? So review the documents. If I'm writing an evidence, I'll say copy of the document, whatever the document is. If I say recalculate and I'm writing an evidence, I'll say results of recalculation. If I say discuss, then I'll say notes of discussion. And if I say analyze as a procedure, then I'll say results of analysis. So is the examiner asking you to write a procedure, or is the examiner asking you writing an evidence? If the examiner asks you to write a procedure, I'll be writing the left hand side. But if the examiner asks me to write an evidence, I'll be writing the right side. Can you see the left side and the right side? All of you? So the left side is the procedure, the right side is the evidence. So is the examiner asking a procedure, or is the examiner asking the evidence? So is there a segregation between the two? Is everyone clear on the segregation? Is everyone clear on the segregation? Right? And please remember one thing, that most of the time, the documents, that's just one last thing, right? Most of the time when you see the documents pertains to management. The document pertains to management, right? So we write copy of the document because you cannot keep the original, right? But sometime there are some documents, sometime there are documents which are included in the working paper as original, right? So there are many documents which are included in the working paper as original. For example, the representation letter. I will not say copy of the representation letter, but rather I will simply be saying representation letter, because this working paper is the auditor working paper, right? Representation letter. I cannot say copy of the representation letter. Or breakups, breakups of sales, or breakup of expenses. So breakups will never come as copy in exam paper. Breakups will come directly as like original in your working paper file. Then something like the financial statements. If I put the financial statements in my file, I'll not say copy of the financial statement. I'll directly say draft financial statements. I'll not say copy of the financial statement. I'll be saying draft financial statement. No, not at all, Faraz Khan. Procedures and MTR don't come together. MTR comes with evidence. MTR comes with evidence. So in a question on evidence, there is an MTR. So once you do the MTR, then you will switch to evidence. And I'll be demonstrating a live question on the same just after 10 to 15 minutes. Yes, exactly. Ehsan Ali, that's the right perspective you are raising. Right. So is everyone clear on writing a procedure and writing an evidence? Yes, exactly. Copy of the board minutes, right? Copy of the board minutes is an evidence. Copy of the board minutes is an evidence. So can all of you realize how you tone a procedure and how you tone an evidence? And have you realized what you need to do when you are commenting on the matters, and what exactly you need to do when you're putting up a working paper file? Uh, Not exactly the consequence. It's like a common sense, right? And you have to portray professionalism. You have to portray professionalism in the exam paper. So obviously the draft financial statement cannot be copy of a draft financial statement, because that's something which belongs to the auditor. That's the subject matter of the auditor. So you need to demonstrate professionalism in the exam paper, right? Common sense. You are a manager. So if you are a manager, you need to portray the common sense, right? So a copy of the draft financial statement is wrong. It's only the draft financial statement. The draft financial statement is the one the auditor gets, right? In the course of the audit, and at the end of the audit, the auditor gets the actual financial statement. Yes, I am doing a question, right, on evidences. And again, you have so much resource of my previous practice to pass webinars, March, June, September, December. You can just go through them. I have done so much of a practice questions in these previous webinars, which can really help you out with drafting of evidences. And in all my previous webinars, right, I have shared the tricks of writing evidences. I've shared the tricks of writing procedures, right? So there is an ample resource already available on the Vimeo, which can be really wonderful for you. In whichever topic you feel you are underconfident, you can explore the previous webinars, because in each and every webinar you will get some clues, and those clues can really be beneficial for you in terms of coming good on that topic. Okay, now I am starting on with the practice phase, because I've really demonstrated to you the nature of the question. So is everyone, let's give me a quick feedback, right? First, is everyone clear on procedures and the marking scheme? Is everyone clear on the procedures and the marking scheme of procedures? Okay. Is everyone clear on the question on evidence? Is everyone clear on the question on evidence? Do everyone knows when the examiner says comment on the matter, what will you do? Comment on the matter, what will you do? Is everyone clear on that? And when the examiner says comment on the matters, how many marks we will gain for that? 4.5 marks. 4.5 marks, right? And when the examiner says explain the evidence, what will we imagine in front of us? Explain the evidence, what will we imagine in front of us? The file, the box file. And will we only write evidence in the paper form? Will we only write paper in the evidence form? Okay, that's perfectly clear, right? And I think there was a query asking for the type 2 question on evidence. I have covered the type 2 question on evidence in my December 18 webinar. So if anyone is interested in doing the type 2 question on evidence, can explore my December 18 webinar on Vimeo, and you will be really benefited to get the track of the type 2 question, right? So if anyone is interested in the type 2 question, some of the students are, so can really benefit from the December 18 webinar. Okay, that's the first clue, right? Now it's time for the first break. You need to absorb the the drilling, and right after the break, we are starting with exam question. We are starting with an exam question on evidence, matters and evidence, right? So I'll do two questions on matters and evidence, so that you are very clear on the allocation of marks, because some students are still blur on the marks allocation, though that's very simple. So I'll clarify the marking scheme during the break. And secondly, I'll be drilling an answer live in front of you, will give you a better understanding of how to go down putting an answer for scoring good set of marks. All right, is that clear to everyone? So we are off to break, and it's approximately 10:10 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time. So we'll break for like 15 minutes, and I'll be back at 10:25 p.m. the Pakistan Standard Time. And then in the last 1 hour of the session, I'll just be exploring the past papers. I hope you had a good session so far. If you can just drop your quick feedback on the session so far, the first 1 hour of this session approximately, before I join you live for the second part of the session right after the break. So I'll be looking forward to your feedback to this session, and how clear you have been on the topic which has been discussed within the time limitations, right? So when you're giving the feedback, do also consider the limitation of that time to roll a topic. And there are many other valuable webinars conducted in March, June, September, December, which are still available to all of you to explore and be good at. Okay, so I'm taking a break, and in 15 minutes from now, 10:25 p.m. the Pakistan Standard Time, I'll be back live. Okay, welcome back after the break. We are into the day two of the AAA Practice to Pass session for March 2019 exams. And just prior to the break, we were discussing the procedures and evidence and the marking scheme basically. Now, right after the break and into the last 1 hour of this session, we are focusing on drafting an exam paper. Right in front of your screen is the June 14 exam, question number 3, part A, which is on evidence. This is a question which I have never attempted before in any of my previous webinar. So this is a fresh question of which you can gain access to in this March 2019 webinar. Now let's see the requirements of this question. When you look at your screen in front and you scroll down and you look at the requirements the examiner is asking for in this question, it's the simple, straightforward requirement we just understood prior to break. See the requirement over here. And please remember, this is a question of June 14. Now, at that point in time, the marking scheme of MTR was 1113. The marking scheme of MTR in a question on evidence has changed from June 18 exams. So since June 18 exams, the marking scheme of MTR in a question on evidence has become 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. So we are solving this question as per the revised marking scheme, which is 1.5, right? MTR is materiality, treatment, and risk. We have been discussing that yesterday. We are still discussing that today. So MTR means the materiality, treatment, and risk. You weren't there. You weren't there before the break when we were discussing the breakup of comment on the matters, MTR. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now the examiner says comment on the matters. Now we know what matters are. One matter is M, materiality, one matter is treatment, one matter is risk. And how many marks we will gain from the matters? 4.5 marks. Now, in the second part, the examiner is saying, explain the audit evidence. Now we know what explain the audit evidence is, right? The audit evidence has to be in a tangible form and the audit evidence has to be in the working paper. Now you need to imagine that. So you need to come down with a good answer. So matters and explain the evidence. That's from the June 14 exams, right? Now let's see how many marks we have above. For the one requirement, we have in total 8 marks. We have in total 8 marks. And for the second requirement, 2, we have 7 marks. Now, if I imagine that situation number 1 and situation number 2 both have one accounting treatment, then for every accounting treatment, I will have a materiality, and for every accounting treatment, I will have a risk. So if I assume that in the situation number 1 and in the situation number 2, there is one accounting treatment. So for one accounting treatment, how many marks can I gain on the matters? For one accounting treatment, how many marks can I gain on the matters? 4.5. Because for one accounting treatment, I have 1.5 marks. For the materiality of the accounting treatment, 1.5. And for the risk of the accounting treatment, another 1.5. So I can see the 8 marks, right? So from the 8 marks, I can deduct 4.5 marks straight away. Because obviously there will be an MTR in the one situation, right? And can I see the 7 marks in the situation 2? So from the 7 marks, can I deduct 4.5 marks? So I know how much evidences I have to write. So 8 minus 4.5. How many evidences will I be writing? 4 because I will be left with 3.5 marks, right? So, and then in the second situation, I have 7 marks. So from 7, I deduct 4.5. So how many evidences will I be writing? 3. That's great. Okay, let's formulate the answer now. I'll be um, coming back to the question and the word file on a very regular basis now. And you have to keep a very strong concentration on the screen, how I go about. And if you have any confusions on the marking scheme, that will become clear through this drafting. So we are taking June 14 in focus and the question 3, part A. And we are just having a drilling of the question on matters and evidence in working paper file. Now we have two parts. We have part 1 and we have a part 2. Okay. Now in the first part, let's see what is the first part about. This is the proper format, right, of answering a question in exam paper 1 and 2. Okay, let's see what is 1. If I read 1, it says Cooper Company factories are recognized within the property, plant, and equipment at a carrying value of a $60 million. I can see a value, and this value can help me in determining the materiality, right? So, how much is the carrying value of the factory? $60 million. Half the factories produces a chemical, half the factories. So examiner is saying not all the $60 million, half of it. So if I need to determine the materiality, I will not determine the materiality on 60 million, rather than I will determine the materiality on half, which is $30 million. Half the factories produces a chemical which is used in a farm animal feed. Recently, the government introduced a regulation stipulating that the chemical is to be phased out over the next 3 years. Is the government regulation a condition for testing the factories for impairment? The government has introduced a regulation stipulating the chemical which is made in the factory. So is that an indicator of impairment? Should I review the factories for impairment? Because the government has introduced a regulation stipulating the chemical. So my factories makes the chemical, right? So should I review my factory's recoverable amount? Half the factories? Should I review my factories for impairment? Right? So can you see an accounting treatment coming from the government regulation? The government regulation is becoming an indicator of impairment. And how much of the factories are affected? Only half the factories. So can you see the examiner giving us the total assets? The total assets of the companies are $240 million. And can I see $60 million as the carrying value? But I am not taking $60 million because the examiner is saying half the factories. So I'm taking $30 million and I'll divide the $30 million with $240 million, half the factories. And then I write the T. See, how would you write it? If I take you back to the Word file, I'll put the heading Cooper Company Factories. Under the Cooper Company Factories, I'll put my first heading, which is matters. And under the matter, I'll start writing. See how I write the answer. Half the factories which produces the chemical which the government now wants to stipulate. Now wants to stipulate. Stipulate means stop. Half the factories which produces a chemical which the government now wants to stipulate, that is $30 million. Half the factories which produces the chemical waste, the government now wants to stipulate that this $30 million is 12.5% of the total assets, hence material to the financial statements. And that's where I'm scoring my first 1.5 marks. So you comment on the materiality of half the factories. So half the factories is 12.5% of the total assets, and that is material to the financial statement. Straight away, I score my 1.5 marks as per the new marking scheme. Then I go to the next para and I tell examiner that the government regulation is an external indicator, for the management to review the factories, to review half the factories, for impairment and to determine the recoverable amount of half the factories. And to determine the recoverable amount of half the factories by identifying the value in use and the fair value less the cost to sell. So you just wrote an accounting treatment, right? That the government regulation is an external indicator for management to review half the factories for impairment and to determine the recoverable amount of half the factories by identifying the value in use and the fair value less the cost to sell, and ensure that the recoverable amount and recognizes impairment if the recoverable amount exceeds the carrying amount, and should recognize an impairment if the recoverable amount exceeds by identifying the value in use and the fair value less cost to sell, whichever is less to sell, whichever is less. And recognizes the impairment. So did I wrote the treatment? And for this treatment, how much marks will I get? For the writing the treatment, how many marks will I gain? 1.5. 1.5. So I wrote the M, I wrote the T. Now I change the para and I write the risk. If the management has not reviewed if the management has not reviewed half the factories for impairment, it could lead to overstatement of the property, plant, and equipment. It could lead to the overstatement of the property, plant, and equipment, and the profit of the company. So did I wrote my risk? Did I wrote the risk? Yes, whichever is higher, whichever is higher. Yes, that's for the asset held for sale, right? Whichever is lower. Yes, for impairment is whichever is higher. So if the management has not reviewed half the factories for impairment, it could lead to overstatement. It can lead to overstatement of property, plant, and equipment and the profit of the company. So I get another 1.5 mark. Now, can you see the drafting of how we go down with MTR in like 3 paragraphs? Is everyone clear now on MTR? That in a situation when the examiner raise a question, right, then you need to write an MTR, right? Yes, I have corrected that to whichever is higher, right? That has been corrected. So is everyone clear now on writing the MTR and how you getting your 4.5 marks out of the 8 marks? And remember, this question has been set at a time when the marking scheme was one each, but we are doing it as per the revised marking scheme of 1.5 marks each. Now, technically, I got my 4.5 marks, right? Now, should I be writing the evidences after? Yes, exactly, Arshman Asif. Uh, you will get 3 marks when you write the same situation in a question on risk. And when you write the same situation in an evidence topic, you get 4.5 marks. These are two different topics, right? An examiner used two different marking schemes. So the marking scheme for evidence is different. The marking scheme for risk is different. These are two discrete topics. They're not the same topics, right? So I hope you're clear on that, Arshman Asif. So you use the same formula in a risk topic, you get 3 marks. You use the same formula in the evidence topic, you get 4.5 marks. Right now we need to write evidences. So let's write evidences. Evidence in working paper file. Number one. Okay. The first evidence. Should I have the government regulation in my working paper file? Should I have the government regulation in my working paper file? Yes or no? Because the government regulation is important. Should I have the government regulation in my working paper file as my first paper? Is that an important regulation? Is that an important regulation which I should be having in my file? But I cannot have a copy of the regulation because I can download the regulation from the website, right? So we have a copy of the regulation? No, we should only have a regulation in the file because regulation is downloadable from the website. So the very first evidence I should have in my file is the government regulation. Is the government regulation to confirm that the government intends to stipulate, the government intends to stipulate, the government intends to stipulate the use of chemical over the next 3 years. Okay. Should I have the results? Should I have the notes of discussion with the management to confirm whether they have recognized the impairment or not? Should I have the notes of discussion with the management? I must have done a discussion with the management, right? To understand whether they have done the impairment or not. So should I have the notes of discussion? Notes of discussion with management to confirm whether they have tested the factories for impairment or not. And then can I have the working of the management if they have done the impairment? Can I have the working of the recoverable amount? Can I have the working of the recoverable amount of the management? The management must have made a working of the recoverable amount, the value in use, and the fair value. So can I have the working of the management? So can I have the copy of the management working? Copy of the management working pertaining to impairment review to confirm the accuracy of the recoverable amount determined. So can I have the copy of the management working? Because if they have done the impairment review, there will be a working of the management, right? Through which I can confirm the accuracy of the recoverable amount the management has determined. Yes, when the vakas, when the carrying amount is less and the recoverable amount is more, then you need to recognize the provision, right? When the recoverable amount exceeds the carrying amount, then you should record an impairment. Okay, should I be taking a representation letter on the fair values to confirm the accuracies of the fair value, or should I be taking an expert report? Should I be taking an expert report for the fair values? For the fair values which are part of the expert report. So can I take the copy of the expert report to confirm the adequacy of the fair values? Can I also take the representation letter for the completeness of the recoverable amount? I can take the representation letter for the completeness of the recoverable amount determined by the management. Yes, representation letter for the completeness of the recoverable amount determined by the management, right? The word management is coming in the last, right, Ali Raza? So that's very clear. The representation letter is from the management. As I say, it's determined by the management. Now, can you see these evidences in front of your screen? Did I break the rules I set for evidences? Government regulation, right? Notes, copy, representation. Can I take a copy of the representation letter? Or I can just take the representation letter. Yes, Umar and Tariq, I'm coming to you. I am coming to the second point, right? I'm just completing the impairment situation. Then I'll come to the second situation. So, did I got my 4.5 marks from writing the MTR around impairment, and then I sketched down 5 evidences. So 5 and 4.5 is already taking me above the marking scheme of 8. So can you see the 5 marks coming from evidences and 4.5 marks coming from the MTR? So we are already standing at 9.5 marks, and that's not the end of the story. There is a second problem in the same case. So that means there was plenty to score, but I only need to score 8 marks. That's not the end of the case for Cooper Company Factories, because there is still another accounting treatment in Cooper Company Factories, and already with one accounting treatment, I've taken my marks to maximum. Now, in an exam paper, you will come down with second heading here. What was the first heading? The first heading was Cooper Company Factories. Then comes the second heading. The second heading is the feasibility study into new chemical. Feasibility study into the new chemical, right? Matters. You go back to the case and you see this. You see the last 2 lines of the paragraph we were reading. It says Cooper Company has started Cooper Companies has started a research a replacement chemical which is allowed under the new regulation and has spent $1 million on the feasibility study. So Cooper Company has started a research. So how much amount have they spent on the research? $1 million. So is there another accounting treatment of the research cost here? And is there a value of the research cost? So can I determine the MTR of the research cost? Can I have a value of a research cost here? Will I divide the research cost with the profit, or will I divide the research cost with the total assets? Will I divide the research cost $1 million with that of the profit or with that of the total assets? Right? Because research cost has to be expensed out, right? So obviously it will be divided with the profit. So can I see the research cost at $1 million? And is there a treatment of a research cost? And is there a risk of the research cost, right? So if I go back to my Word file and I'll keep drilling the matters now. Just want to show you how many marks you had, and you just have to score 8. Then the first thing you tell examiner is that the research cost incurred on the new chemical, the research cost incurred on the new chemical, research cost incurred on the feasibility of the new chemical, which is $1 million, is 6.6% of the profit, hence material to the financial statement. Hence material to the financial statements. So I get my 1.5 marks. Then I get to the second paragraph and I say research cost when incurred should be expensed out. Research cost when incurred should be expensed out. Should be expensed out. So that's the accounting treatment for 1.5 marks. I cannot stretch the accounting treatment here, right? Yes, I'm completing the answer, right? You will stop in the exam paper when you complete your 8 marks, right? And I'm trying to show you how many marks you had. And from that, you need to score 8. So there was a potential here, right? So research cost when incurred should be expensed out. That's a definite 1.5 marks. I cannot stretch beyond that. And then I tell examiner, however, if the research cost is capitalized, it will overstate the intangible assets. It will overstate the intangible assets and the profit of the company. See, I wrote the risk for another 1.5 marks. Accounting treatment. Sometimes it's simple to write an accounting treatment in like a line, just like this. And sometimes it's a bit lengthy to write an accounting treatment, just like the impairment accounting treatment. So see, we score 4.5 marks. See the length of the matters and see the length of the matter we wrote above for ICE 36. And see the length of the ICE 38. Yes, exactly. You need to bargain your marks, right? You need to bargain your marks. You need to identify where can I score marks, and you need to find your 8 marks. You need to find your 8 marks in exam paper. Now, can we write evidences? Will I have the copy of the board minutes which must have given the approval to incur a research cost into a new chemical? Will I have a copy of the board minutes? Copy of the board minutes to confirm the approval of incurring the research cost of $1 million into a new chemical. Right? Then Should I have the extracts of the feasibility study? Can I have extracts of the feasibility study? Because I don't need the feasibility study in full in my file, right? So I will just have a summary of that. Extracts of the feasibility study to confirm that the feasibility was undertaken, the feasibility was undertaken, and the new chemical is commercially viable, and the new chemical is commercially viable. So I can have the extracts of the feasibility study because it's a big document. I can have a copy of the board minutes. Now, the company must have expensed out the $1 million, right? So can I take the breakup of the operating expense to confirm that $1 million was expensed out? So I can take the breakup of operating expenses. See, I didn't wrote copy of the breakup. Breakup of operating expenses to confirm that the research cost was expensed out. Yes, I can even take a copy of the bank statement, right, to confirm the outflow of a $1 million. But see, where are we standing? So much productive, so much productive 8 marks. No, 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 not at all, Umar. Umar, see this situation. I have to write matters, plus I have to write evidence, and I have to score 8 marks. Now, if I make a formula in the exam paper, something like this, right? There is one student, there is a student one who says, I'll write uh, only matters and score 8 marks. Then this student is absolutely wrong. You are an absolutely, you are absolutely wrong. So you just think, I write 4.5 marks for impairment, I write 4.5 marks for ICE 38, and I take 9 marks. You're absolutely wrong then, because you're skipping one requirement of the question. Okay, there is another student, student two, who write only ICE 36 and score the 4.5 marks, and plus write like 4 evidences to score 8 marks, and the students skip ICE 38. Now this is a very right student. This is very right, because you did both the things right. You did both the things. So you write ICE 36, 4.5 marks, you write 4 evidences. Then the last one, another example. There is a student 3 in the exam hall who is more clever. He says, okay, I write ICE 36 and I take 4.5, right? And I only write 2 evidences and I take 6.5 marks. Then I have to take 8, right? So I write 2 evidences. Then I only write IAS 38 for materiality. And I take 1.5 marks. See, I make my 8 marks. This is even a right student. You have to make your 8 marks, but you cannot skip the 2 requirements. You can do something less and something more, right, Umar? You can do something less and something more, but you cannot skip anything. So you can maximize one thing and you can minimize one thing, but there cannot be something like a zero. So see the 3 equations and you can make more such equations. So the third student took 4.5 marks from IS 36, then he took 2 marks from evidences, and then he just took 1.5 mark by writing the materiality of the research cost, and he scores 8. So can there be different ways of gaining 8 marks, everyone? Can there be different ways of gaining 8 marks if I know the marking scheme? Is is everyone getting that message? So can there be different ways of gaining the 8 marks? So is now everyone clear how MTR makes 4.5 marks? Because a lot of students were unclear about that. Now is everyone clear how this MTR makes the 4.5 marks and how to write it? How to write MTR in a question on evidence? Okay, and now is everyone clear how to write evidences? How to write evidences and take your marks? Okay, now just a last quick exercise because that will really change the track. If I look at the number 2 situation, the number 2 situation is very different. And in the number 2 situation, I have 7 marks to gain. Now let's see how can we make the number 2 situation with methods and evidence. Go back to the case. I'm reading the case number 2, right? In October 2013, Cooper Company's finance director, Henna, purchased a car from the company. The carrying value of the car was 50,000. Now, the moment we see the finance director means this is a related party transaction, and the finance director purchased a car and the examiner deliberately declined the value to just a $50,000. So the student gets confused in the exam hall that we need to determine the materiality by amount. This is not a materiality by amount. This is a materiality by nature. This is a car which has been purchased not by an ordinary person. This is a car which has been purchased by a finance director, which requires a disclosure in the notes to the financial statement. So, are we working on a 50,000 value here, or are we just working on a director here? It is a directed transaction. It is a directed transaction, right? Which requires a disclosure in the notes to the financial statement. So, is this car sold to an employee or is this car sold to a director? So when the car is sold to a director, are we concerned about the value? When the car is sold to a director, are we concerned about the value or are we concerned about the nature of the transaction? The nature of the transaction, right? So over here, in the situation number 2, do we only have 4.5 marks for MTR? Because I think there is no two accounting treatments here, right? In the situation number 2, there is only one accounting treatment. So that means from the 7 marks, I can only deduct 4.5 marks. So how many evidences I should be writing then after writing the related party transaction? I should be writing 3 evidences, right? So if you see my answer, I'm just making a sketch here. When you write the evidence, your first evidence would be the car sold to finance director, whatever the name of the finance director is. The car sold to finance director is a material by nature transaction, as all all transactions with directors are utmost important, are utmost important for shareholders. So see, I didn't use the value. So we are scoring the 1.5 marks. Then you come to the second paragraph and you say the car sold to finance director should be disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. The car sold should be disclosed in the notes to the into the financial statements, whereby the notes should also include the fact that the director is yet to pay for the car purchased. That that is there is a receivable from the director of $50,000. So the finance director purchased the car, right? But he didn't pay for the car yet. That is still outstanding. So when you're writing a disclosure in the notes of this transaction, you should also be writing in the disclosure that the $50,000 is yet to be paid at the balance sheet date. So there is a related party receivable coming from this particular finance director. So I'm getting my 1.5 marks. And then I go down and say, if no disclosure is given, if no disclosure is given, then the financial statements could be materially misstated. So I got my other 1.5 marks. So see, I got my 7 marks. Yes, the market value is given for the arm length transaction. This is not an arm length transaction, right? Had it been an arm length transaction, you should have sold the car at the market value. But Muhammad Ayub, the $75,000 is given in the case study just to confuse you or just to tell you this is not an arm length transaction. It is a related party transaction. Had it been an arm length transaction, it would have been sold at 75. But because it was not an arm length transaction, it was sold at $50,000. No, we do not state the impact on the audit report, right? We just keep it down to the risk. We just keep it down to the risk. Yes, I have given the details about the disclosure, right, Farooq? You can read my paragraph. I have given the details about the disclosure. Even the disclosure should state the receivable as well. Right? So whenever you get a related party transaction, you are not concerned about the values because related party transactions are material by nature, not material by amount. So whatever is the amount, we are not concerned about it. We are only concerned about the related party transaction, which is material by nature. So have we got our 4.5 marks? Now, evidences, 3 evidences, right? Number one, should I have the draft financial statements to confirm the adequacy of the disclosure made in with regards to the car sold to finance director? So should I have the draft financial statements in my working paper file, which will confirm that the disclosure of this car sold to the finance director was given, right? Second, the there is still a receivable at the balance sheet date of a $50,000. So what if this receivable has been subsequently paid? So can I have a copy of the bank statement to confirm whether the $50,000, which was the receivable at the year end, was subsequently paid by the director? So at the year end, there was a receivable, right? So can I check subsequent to the year end whether $50,000 was paid or not? So can I have the copy of the bank statement? Copy of the bank statement to confirm whether 50 to confirm whether the $50,000 receivable at the year end was subsequently paid, was subsequently paid after the year end, was subsequently paid. So can I have a copy of the subsequent bank statement, right? That's a better situation. Subsequent bank statement. So can I have a copy of the subsequent bank statement to confirm whether $50,000 receivable at the year end was paid? Right? Yes, I can also take the breakup of receivable. That's fine. I can take the breakup of receivables to ensure to confirm that the $50,000 was included as a relate as as a receivable from finance director. Right, so are you getting the track of the evidences? See, I use draft financial statements, I use copy, I use breakups, and I told you in my lecture that I will not write the word copy of the breakup, I'll only write breakup. So did I stick to the rules? Breakup, no copy of breakup. The draft financial statements, not a copy of the draft financial statements. And yes, the bank statement is a management document, so I'll say copy of the bank statement. So 4.5 and 3, 7.5. So are you getting a structured answer now for MTR and evidences? Are you very clear about the topic we discussed today on the day 2, copy the evidences and the comment on the matters? And is everyone clear on the marking scheme now? Yes, yes, Essen, it can be. It can be done. It can be done. Okay, just one last thing before just skimming over the December 18 exam question which came in the last exam sitting. Just want to clarify one thing. Just want to raise this clarification once forever because a lot of students are still blur. See the clarification. There are two situations, right? There is a question on audit risk, and there is a question on risk of material misstatement, and then there is a question on evidence. These are two different questions, right? In one exam setting, for example. Now, I told you yesterday that when you are attempting a question on audit risk, and there is an accounting treatment, in a question on audit risk, you can still do the MTR. Did I told you that yesterday, that in a question on audit risk, you can do the MTR? But when you do the MTR in a question on audit risk, you will just gain 1 for M, 1 for T, 1 for R. So you will only gain 3 marks. But when you do the same thing in a question on evidence, you are giving, the examiner has given you generous markings, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. So the examiner brought it down to 4.5 marks. Is that clarification clear to everyone? Because there had been lots of questions about the two marking schemes here. This is your examiner marking scheme. I cannot do anything about it. And examiner changed that marking scheme from June 18 exams. Before that, it was equal on the left side and on the right side. Now on the left side, you have 3 marks. On the right side, you have 4.5 marks. So you should be happy about it. The examiner is giving you a generous marking scheme in a question on evidence. So is everyone clear on the utilization of MTR and the marking schemes in a question on audit risk and in a question on evidence? Is that clear? Left side, right side of the table? Yes, exactly. As when Khalid, that's absolutely right. Okay, now just quickly scrolling over the last exam sitting question, which was the December 18 question. And if anyone is repeating, you must have done this December 18 question actually. Question number 2, part B. Now this was a very scoring question in the last exam sitting, but student did a lot of blunders with this question. And I think this was just a repetition of the question which came in December 14 exams. This was just a replica of the December 14 exams, which came in December 18 exams, question number 2B. Let me show you this. Now can you see in front of your screen, this was a question 2B of the last exam sitting. This was basically a question on going concern reporting. Question 2 is a reporting question, right, in the new format of the paper. So the question 2 was a reporting question, but in the end of the reporting question, the examiner gave 8 marks or 9 marks on evidence. See this requirement here. Can you see this requirement over here, which is for this? See this requirement in the red box. Explain the audit evidence in respect of the cash flow forecast, which you should expect to find in the review of the audit working papers on going concern. So which working papers are we reviewing? Are we reviewing any specific working papers? Are we reviewing any specific working papers in this context? We are reviewing the working papers of going concern, working papers of going concern. And examiner is saying explain the evidence in respect of the cash flow forecast, which you should expect to find in your review of the working papers of going concern. So in the going concern section of my working paper file, can you imagine a file in front of you? And in the file, there will be a section. And in the section of the file, there will be the working papers of going concern. And in the going concern section of the working paper file, there will be some evidence you must have gathered about a cash flow forecast. So evidence about the cash flow forecast. Evidence about the cash flow forecast. So let's see what evidence can we have. Let's go up and see this. Can you see a note coming here about the cash flow forecast, which is the note number 5? Let's read this and let's understand the evidence. The going concern working papers, but in this question, is the examiner asking for comment on the matters, or is the examiner directly asking the evidence you should expect to find in the file? So are we directly writing the evidence, or are we doing the comment on the matters as well? I need your quick responses. Directly the evidence, right? So are we writing the MTR here? No, because the examiner is not asking for that. Examiner is saying explain the evidence. So are we directly writing evidences? How many evidences are we writing? How many marks we have? How many marks we have? 9. How many evidences are we writing? 9 evidences on the cash flow forecast. Now, just be quick. The going concern working papers. I'm reading the point number 5. I'm reading the point number 5. The going concern working papers includes a cash flow forecast. So what will be in my file? Will I have a copy of the cash flow forecast in my file as the first evidence? Copy of the cash flow forecast. Will that be in my file as the first document? As the first document? So copy of the cash flow forecast to confirm the assumptions taken by the management in preparing the forecast. Now, just be in a very disorderly manner here, because I just have 12 minutes, right? And just need to brush over the cash flow forecast. Should we have a representation letter in the file about the adequacy of the assumptions used in preparing the forecast? Do we need representation for assumptions? Yes or no? Do we need a representation for assumptions? So should I have a representation letter uh, to confirm the adequacy or completeness of the assumptions used in preparing the cash flow forecast? So first of all, in my working papers, I should have a copy of my cash flow forecast. Then I should be having a representation letters, right? And then I have to go back to the case study to find more points from the case study. Let's go down, see the case study. Okay, the going concern working papers includes a cash flow forecast for the 12 months. The cash flow forecast assumes that Delay company's revenue will increase by 25%. Delay company revenue will increase by 25%. Should I have the sales forecast as well to confirm on what basis the sales will increase by 25%? So for revenue increasing, what support document should I be having? Should the management had made a sales forecast? Should I be having a sales forecast to accompany the revenue will increase by 25%? Yes or no? So sales will increase by 25%. Number one. So should I have copy of the sales forecast to confirm the assumptions used by the management to the assumptions used by management for predicting that sales will increase by 25% over the next year, and to further confirm the realisticness of the assumptions used. So what assumptions the management have used for increasing the sales? Was that the right assumption? So is the sales forecast important here? Is the sales forecast generating the cash inflows for you? So is there a link of a sales forecast with cash flows? And was that given in the case study that the sales are expected to increase by 25%? So should I have some evidence of that in my file about sales forecast? Okay, I can also have the notes of discussions with management or with the sales director. I can have a note of discussion with sales director confirming the justifications used by the sales director in predicting that sales will grow by 25%. So I can have a meeting with the sales director, right? I can have a meeting with the sales director and I can have a discussion with him that can you justify me on what grounds and on what basis the sales will increase by 25%, right? Okay, let's go down. Number fifth. Revenue will increase by 25% next year, and following the reorganization of its credit control facility, can I discuss with management what exactly this reorganization of credit control facility is? What are we reorganizing in the credit control facility? Are we laying off some staff, or are we adding some staff, or are we reducing the staff? What sort of reorganization are we doing? So should I have a results of discussion, notes of discussions about the reorganization of the credit control facility? And can I have the board minutes about the approval of the reorganization? Can I have the copy of the board minutes to confirm the approval of the reorganization of the credit control facility? And can I have a notes of discussion to confirm exactly what the reorganization includes, and what specific measures the company intend to take about reorganization. What they think about reorganization, how they would be going about it, what steps will they be taking. See, I reached 6. So management wants to reorganize. That's a very vague statement. So should I first see the approval of reorganization, and then should I take the further details about reorganization by like having a discussion that what exactly the reorganization includes? There might be many December 18 students in this webinar. Are you getting an eye opener? That was such an easy question. You have to read the note number 5 And you need to think, I have a file in front of me. The file pertains to the cash flow. What evidences will I be having from the note number 5 in my file? And see how easy was that? If anyone is here for December 18 exams, reappearing for March 19 exams, you lost an easy exam sitting. You lost an easy exam question. Okay, let's go down, see the last point. Following the credit control organization, its customer will pay on average after 60 days. Can I have a results of analytical procedures to see how much time the customers used to take before the reorganization? So because it says the customer will pay on average after 60 days after the reorganization. So can I see currently how much time are they taking? So can I have the results of the analysis here? Results of analytical procedures to confirm how much time the customer used to take to pay to the company prior to reorganization, and to further confirm the realisticness of 60 days. I need to be I need to be very assured here, right? Because management says that after the reorganization, they will be approximately taking 60 days. So I need to see my results of analytical procedures and how much time were they taking before? Were they taking like 90 days, 100 days? And has there been a sharp reduction in that? Because if there is a sharp reduction, I need to question management that is it realistic? Because prior to the reorganization, for example, they were taking 100 days. Now, post reorganization, they're taking 60 days. So, is that a justifiable reduction? Because that's a very sharp reduction. And you remember, right? If the days goes down, your cash inflows will improve. And the management can window dress the cash inflows. So the management wants the cash inflows on a higher side because that's the window dressing. Okay, the last line. The forecast also assumes that the bank will provide the new finance. So can I have copy of the correspondence with the bank to confirm that the bank will provide the new finance? Can I have the copy of the correspondence? Because the bank and the company must be having a correspondence. So can I take the copy of the correspondence to confirm that the bank will provide the new finance in January 2019? So downwards, copy of the correspondence with the copy of the correspondence between the bank and the company to confirm that the bank is likely to disperse a loan in January. The bank is likely to disperse a loan in January. What was so difficult about this question, December 18 students? You had a bonus 8 or 9 marks here. You need just to read the note number 5, and you need to imagine that there is a file in front of me, and in the file, what should I be having about the cash flow forecast? See what I did. Copy, results, notes, representation letters. Was that not simple? Did I wrote anything out of the case? Did did, did I not read the note number 5, or did I ignore the note number 5? Did you realize reading the case? Did I ignore the note 5 and wrote the answer, or did I read the note 5 and wrote the answer? And how many times you do that in the exam paper that you don't read the case properly when the answer is in the case study? So please, just into the last 1 minute of this session, I need just to make some closing remarks here. This was the day 2, right, of this practice to pass session for March 19. and the topic in focus was evidence. And again, just a reminder that if you want to get more practice on evidence, I have regularly done evidence in March 18, June 18, September 18, and December 18. So you can get plenty of practice on evidences from my prior webinar. And in this webinar, I just kept those two questions which I have not done earlier so that you get a diversity of practice on this topic. But I hope I need some quick yes and no from your side. Are you all clear on the marking scheme of this topic? Are you all clear on the marking scheme of this topic? Did you got any benefits of the drafting? Did you got to know how to draft answers? So have you learned anything out of the session today? Had it been a productive session for you, the day two of this session, the practice to pass session? Okay, so now you have day one, now you have day two, right? Now you can concentrate on the videos, which will be uploaded on the Vimeo later. And we are meeting tomorrow for day three. And do you know the agenda of the day three? We are meeting tomorrow for ethical, professional, and quality control issues. Such an important topic, and such an important topic where students do a lot of blunders in the exam paper, right? So it's time to say you goodbye and Allah Hafiz. And I'm signing off, and I'll be meeting you tomorrow live from 9 to 11:30 p.m. the Pakistan Standard Time for the third day of this practice to pass session for March 19 exams. Goodbye, Allah Hafiz.